Today's our last class, and we have a guest speaker, Brad Smith. And Brad's gonna, I know one of his slides, he's going to introduce what, in terms of where he's at and where he's been. But Brad actually played baseball at Pittsburgh State University. And while he was there, he was a conference, all-conference selection and an academic All-American as well. And then he came to UNL, and he's obviously got some degrees here. And he's worked in the athletics department in a number of different ways. First of all, in the sports analytics part of the athletics department, which is still fairly new. I think it was about 5 years ago, maybe.
Probably timelines are messed up, but I know probably 4 years ago.
Okay.
When Tucker started.
Okay. But Brad actually also worked with the baseball team. I think you actually were the first base coach eventually for the baseball team. I know when I would take my kids to the game, I said, "Hey, that's one of my students out there." But Brad left the university, at least working for the university a few years ago. He's working for the Yankees now, and also teaching some courses at Northwestern University too. Now, before I turn it over to Brad, I do have one short story to talk about regarding Brad when he was a student here. So when Brad took my Tools for Statisticians course, which was a very interesting course that that looked at some of the cutting edge things that were happening in statistics that could be applied across various statistics applications, such as, and this was in 2013, so we looked at R Markdown, which was very new back then. We looked at Shining, which was very new back then. We looked at a lot of stuff like that. And one of the things I allowed the students to do was pick some topics that they could go learn themselves and then present it to all the students in an hour-long presentation. And one of the things that Brad chose was to talk about what's called the compiler package at R, which now actually has been fully integrated into the main R portion itself. And basically what the compiler package did was it helped speed up programs running. And the author of the compiler package is someone by the name of Luke Tierney. He's very famous in statistics. He's one of the R core group members, so the main people who control the main distribution of R. And he actually just at JSM in 2019 was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the section of Computing and Graphical Statistics. So Luke is a professor in the Department of Statistics at the University of Iowa. And when Brad was taking my course, he was at the time working with the baseball team. And so he was traveling with the baseball team to the University of Iowa for a baseball series. So the Huskers were going to play Iowa. And Brad, since he was going to do his presentation on the compiler package, went out of his way and tried to find Luke so he could actually meet Luke on campus. And eventually, I think you tracked him down, and you met him in the hallway, and you said, "Hey, can I take a selfie?" And so, in Brad's presentation, here's an actual slide. There's Brad with Luke in the hallway in the main building for the Department of Statistics. Now, I bring this up because this shows how Brad how Brad just went out his way when, let's say, above the call of duty to put together this great presentation that he did. And now I have a small follow-up to this story that you do not know about. And that is, so I was invited to the University of Iowa last spring to give a presentation on my research. And often when you go visit a university, you often have half-hour meetings with professors who are in the department. And Luke signed up to meet with me for a half hour. So I got to meet Luke in the office. And of course, the first thing I said was, "Do you remember one of my students meeting you in the hallway and taking a selfie?" And I even showed him this picture here. And sorry, Brad, I didn't do it.
That's okay.
Now, I don't know how one doesn't remember that, but he didn't remember it. But anyway, and a little bit of a side note, if you want to take your own picture with Luke, Luke actually often comes to Lincoln for fencing tournaments. He's really into fencing. And so if you go to the Lincoln Fencing Club, if you notice people from Iowa there, I'm sure Luke will be happy to pose with you for a selfie. So anyway, with that then, I will turn it over to Brad.
So it doesn't look like it in this picture, but he was very frightened when I approached him. So go ahead and get started here. So as Dr. Builder said, I currently work for the New York Yankees as a player development analyst. I'll get into some of the specifics of my job and why it's a little different than some of the traditional analytics roles with professional teams. And I also am an instructor in Northwestern's Masters in Data Science program. I teach basically two courses, sports performance analytics and sports management analytics. That's part of the data science program, but also part of a sports analytics certificate that Northwestern offers. So a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. Start off talking about my current roles. Go into a little bit of my background to give you kind of an idea of how I got to where I am, but probably most importantly, kind of give you a roadmap of what not to do while you're in grad school. I kind of jumped around a little bit, so you'll see that. Give you guys some advice that I wish I knew or wish that I had when I started grad school, both times that I did. Talk about some jobs in sports, specifically kind of in baseball, since that's really my area. And then I provided a list of resources, obviously not exhaustive. And if there's any questions that comes up or anything that you want me to, or you want to follow up on with me, feel free to contact me after this. I'll give Dr. Builder my contact info. This presentation is not designed to be very formal, so if you have questions as we go along, feel free to ask and interject whenever appropriate. So that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. So the main role that I have right now is a player development analyst with the Yankees, and like I said, it's a little bit different than a traditional analytics role. There's kind of three main areas that my job entails. The first of which is I evaluate all minor leaguers in our system. For those of you that are not familiar with Major League Baseball and how the minor league system feeds up into that, currently we have about, at any given time, around 300 players in our organization that are working for the Yankees, that are in our system, that are affiliated with our organization and at one of our 9 teams. And so here's kind of a map of where those teams are located. So I'm actually based out of Tampa, Florida, which the weather is much nicer than it is here. I don't like coming back. My fiance, her family's from here. Is really the only reason I do. I do like Nebraska, but the weather is bad. So I live in Tampa. That is where the Yankees have their spring training. That's where the player development complex is located. That's where our high A full season affiliate, and I'll kind of get into what that means here in a second. High A full season affiliate is there, and then we have 2 rookie level Gulf Coast League teams. So 3 affiliates throughout the season, and this is also where players on the major league team come back to rehab. So if you followed the Yankees this year, you'll know that we had a ton of injuries, and so I got to meet all of the big time guys, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, some of those guys as they were rehabbing and trying to get back up to New York. So in addition to the New York team, I'll kind of go from the highest level on down. So our AAA team is in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Our AA team is in Trenton, New Jersey. Like I said, our high A team is in Tampa, and then our Charleston team, our low A team is in Charleston, and this makes up what is called our full season affiliate. So right after spring training, so spring training is typically February and March. Right after spring training, we ship off 4 full season affiliates, and they start playing, and they basically play all the way through August into September. If you're not on one of these teams, you will stay in Tampa for a month and a half, and then you'll report to one of our short season teams. So our most advanced short season team is in Staten Island. We have a team in Pulaski, Virginia, and then we have an academy in the Dominican Republic. And I typically make it to all of these places minimum one time, but most of them 2 times, and some of them even 3 times. And I've been down to the Dominican Academy 3 or 4 times. So pretty broad range of ages, skills, and a lot of other things, which I'll get to a little bit later. The kind of next piece that has continued to evolve. So my position, so player development analyst, not every major league organization has one. We've had, I think I'm the 3rd one that we've had. It was a pretty minor role about 5 years ago, but in the last couple of years, there's been like an exponential kind of boom of new technology. If you're interested, if you haven't heard of this book before, The MVP Machine, this is a book that was published last year that really does a good job of outlining kind of this whole process and what it's meant to not only baseball in general at the major league level, but how it's kind of changed the way that organizations operate, the types of people that are now being employed. If you follow the Yankees or any other major league team, you'll kind of see like an infusion of collegiate coaches, especially pitching coaches. Wes Johnson from Arkansas went to the Twins this year. We just hired Matt Blake, who's a younger guy who was in college. A lot of the Michigan's pitching coach was a coordinator in the Dodgers organization, went to Michigan, and he was a finalist for a lot of major league jobs. There's a lot of technologies, which I'll get to on the next page. A lot of technology being used in everything imaginable, whether it be on-field performance, training, practice, you name it. The players are being tested and being analyzed. We use all this technology, and I say in-house analytics, so there's a lot of publicly available research out there, but that's a very small amount compared to what is being developed in-house. I was absolutely kind of shocked at how much I didn't know when I started this job. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. I know obviously the Yankees are very secretive and don't want me spilling any of their trade secrets, so I'm going to kind of talk pretty generally. But the next page I'll show in a little bit more detail kind of what that looks like. But my role in conjunction with the coaching staffs and coordinators, and then kind of the front office on the player development side, work together to create these development plans based on a player's age, position, ability, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, this is becoming a bigger part of my job. We have around 9 or 10 full-time analysts up in New York. Those guys, for the most part, stick to a lot of the data we get on the major league side. We don't have the same amount of data at all minor league affiliates, and so we kind of have to fill in the gaps. But a lot of my job is informing minor league staffs about some of the research that's being done in New York, how that impacts the way we play the game, the way we coach, and then how the players are supposed to be developing based off of that. So that kind of transitioned into the teaching part, or my teaching role, again, through Northwestern. I'll get into how I got this particular job, but just thought I would cover a couple of the courses that I've taught. So the first one is MSDS 401, and it's basically an introduction to statistics using R. So this is a little bit more in depth than like a Stat 218, if that's what it's still called here. A little bit more in depth with that, but then a big portion of this is people who are not familiar with it. They learn R, learn how to use it for kind of exploratory data analysis, and then start getting acquainted with some of the visualization. I think from my perspective, given that again, I'm in charge of kind of informing people, being able to summarize and visualize things, it makes it a lot easier for them to grasp some of the concepts, some of the more advanced stuff. And so that's kind of what that course covers. And then I teach, again, a 2-course sequence. First of which, sports performance analytics, and I included the book here. So this is kind of the core book, Handbook of Statistical Methods and Analyses in Sports. does a pretty good job of overviewing a couple of different sports from an academic perspective, as opposed to some of the other kind of more general books that some of the courses I researched do. And then sports management analytics. So this book is sports analytics and data science. Just being upfront, the management side is not something that I'm super interested in. I teach it because they asked me to. I know when I was working in the sports analytics department here, Tucker and I, Tucker was a graduate, he got his PhD in the stats department. We did a few projects for ticketing, fan experience, and a couple of other departments that probably fall a little bit more in line with this course, but this also gets into things like contracts, player evaluation, and there's, both courses, and a lot of the stuff I talk about is kind of highly correlated, and it's tough to parse out and focus on one thing. There's a lot of things that go into it. So those are the two courses. Again, I've got a resources slide, but if you want more information, I think in total between the two courses, there's the 2 required books, but then I have about 10 more recommended readings, depending on what sport you prefer, and so I'd be happy to share that with you guys. So next, kind of give you a few examples of the type of data that we're working with, again, from kind of in a broad sense. And so the first thing, you see this visual here. So what you're seeing up here in the top left corner, so one of the things that when I was first introduced to some of the technologies and the things that are starting to creep into the game was there's a lot of physics involved, and it's a pretty open area of research in terms of actually what, like the movements and what is actually happening at a really granular level. And so what you're seeing up here is this is modeling a pitch from release, and you can see the green line, and it's actually a video, which I'll get into here in a second, but you can see the green line, and basically what we've done, or this is from Driveline, so this is publicly available, but what this is doing is breaking the pitch and the trajectory and the movement of that pitch down to just a couple of very simple, so spin axis, spin efficiency, horizontal break, and vertical break. Obviously don't worry too much about that, but this is kind of an example of taking a lot of data, summarizing it, and then being able to utilize that in a number of different ways, and I'll get to that here in a second. So we have like kind of the pitch level detail here. This is a picture from the Hardball Times. Again, it shows a couple of different things. So if you look at this, so you can see the trajectory of the ball or the flight of the ball. So we have all the pitch level detail. We can do the same thing with the batted ball, so we can see how hard the ball's hit. We can see the trajectory in which it's hit. We can see kind of the pull angle, or whether you pulled it or you hit it the other way, or what area on the field it's going to. We have readings on the type of spin that it has, and from there we can kind of model exactly what the trajectory of that ball will look like. And that's important in and of itself, but then we pair that with, if you look here, we have the positions of each outfielder, and we get, I don't know what the actual time frame is, but I think it's around 100 to 200 kind of points per second. And so we can measure where a player started. We can measure, as the ball's being hit. You can see here, so Jason Hayward, this is his initial position. If he's going to catch this ball, he needs to travel 80.9 feet in however long it took for that ball to get there. But we can kind of parse out certain things. So his first step, so how quickly he reacted, what was his top speed, how long was he able to keep that top speed, what was his acceleration. And from that, we can do a lot of different things. From an evaluation standpoint, we can determine, physical characteristics. From a competitive advantage perspective, this is how we figure out where to position guys, depending on the tendencies of a hitter and pitcher. We position our players differently. again, nothing groundbreaking, but this is kind of a visual depiction of the type of data that comes in.
So how many
And-
cameras do you have that are like around the stadium to capture this kind of
So-
information? Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was going to lead into my next thing.
Okay.
So what traditionally was, so we would get different readings for the pitches, which TrackMan was the technology that was used. It was part camera, part radar system. StatCast, which I'll show a video that here in a second. That was a technology that was used on the minor league side. We have pitch effects, field effects. There's about, I don't know, 6 or 7 different data sources. That is all kind of being eliminated. So Hawkeye just signed on to be the new data source for Major League Baseball. I think this is public knowledge. So, but last year at the All-Star break, they installed their system in all Major League ballparks, and I think it's, don't quote me on this, I think it's around 20 cameras, and then it has Doppler, and it's actually, so all of this, so like if you were looking at the position of the fielders, StatCast only did center of mass, was like what it used to put the coordinates on the field. Hawkeye actually has skeletal tracking, which they claim is able to pick up points, like there's like 18 different points on the body that it's able to pick up. And so like the level of detail is unbelievable. I'll get into how that's kind of changing the role of some of the analysts and some of the jobs that organizations are looking for a little bit later. But I've got, so this is a commercial that I think does a pretty good job of showing StatCast and what it kind of offers.
In baseball, every move matters. Each action, each player impacts the next. This season, when there's a stolen base opportunity, StatCast AI powered by AWS will calculate and analyze thousands of data points per second.
So I thought this was a good, oh, it's not showing up on you guys' screen. I apologize for that. Do you know how I get that?
Well, you could end your slideshow. I think the way that you did your slideshow was so that what was on your screen was different than what's actually being projected up.
Okay, well, we can go through. You guys can look at the
Sure.
video. Take my word for it. Essentially what it's showing is that we take in all of this very detailed amount of information, and then with that we compile a lot of situations in the game. Like basically what it's showing is there's a lot of interactions that take place that impact exactly what types of strategic decisions are being made, what types of personnel decisions are being made, and that's kind of where the amount of data that we're getting, the amount of data we're collecting, the types of models that are being deployed, and how all of that is being stored, how accessible it is, how often you update that, is kind of, again, like exponentially increasing. And so a lot of teams are having to beef up not just the analytics portions, but like data engineering is a new position that is popping up all over the place. And then in terms of storage and in terms of computing power and all that, that's something that a lot of teams are struggling with. The Yankees are an organization that obviously has a lot of money, and so we are, us, the Dodgers, the Astros are teams that are kind of at the top end of that, top end in terms of resources and all of that kind of stuff. So lastly, I'm going to go ahead and just show this video. Again, I think it does a good job, and it kind of shows you the importance of the visualization part of what we're trying to do and how we use this information. So what you're looking at is, this is one particular pitch from, I don't know what particular pitcher this is, but what this visualization is going to show you is how we can track and determine, one from a physical standpoint, but then a visual standpoint about changes being made to these variables. So if we're doing a session with a pitcher, we would say, this is where you're at, this is where we want you to be, and this is what that would look like. So you can see we've got 2 different pitches. It's showing you the metrics associated with each, and it's showing you the trajectory of the ball, where they end up location-wise, and then from there, again, we can incorporate all this data and we can determine, based on movement, where's the most effective location to be throwing, depending on the hitter, depending on the count. There's a lot of things that go into it that we have models that tell us information like this and use information like this to help us out. So getting into my background again, this is kind of just to give you a sense of kind of what I've done, sort of to get where I'm at. Again, I don't know that I would recommend following my path. As Dr. Builder mentioned, went to Pittsburgh State University, played baseball, majored in math only because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. That's really all that went in there. After I graduated, I got my first teaching assistantship in the math department there. After about 3 weeks of taking classes, I decided that was not what I wanted to do. And so I decided to look for a job, so I did not complete my master's there. Worked as an actuary for about 2.5 years in Louisville, Kentucky, and Kansas City. I'll get into this on the advice for students, but one bit of advice, which I guess maybe I would say that I did pretty well, was once I realized I didn't want to be an actuary, I didn't stick it out for 10 or 15 years. I decided to give that up. I went back to Pittsburgh State, got my master's in math, and I was a research assistant in the physics department. I was not qualified to be a research assistant in the physics department, but they were kind of desperate, and I suppose I was too. And so I got some good exposure there. I learned a lot, but yeah, I probably wouldn't have done that again if I had the choice. So then in 2010, I got here to Nebraska. Like I said, my timeline's a little messy, and so I kind of split this up into academics, athletics, and another, which would be teaching for the most part. So got my master's in statistics, 2010 to 2012. In that time, I was also a teaching assistant in the stats department, teaching Stat 218. In 2011, so for 1 year, I just went to school and taught. In 2011, I started coaching with the baseball team. And so for a number of years, I was full-time grad student, teaching and coaching. There was a lot of travel involved. And again, I know he mentioned my third presentation, that Tools for Statisticians class. I can probably say that my second presentation in that class maybe was the worst one ever given. Would you agree with that?
No comment.
Okay, the most unprepared one. So it wasn't without some sacrifice and some bad assignments. After 2012, I switched over to the educational psychology department to pursue a PhD in the QQPM program with a minor in stats. As you can see, I'm still currently a student in that department. I'm all but dissertation right now due to a couple of different things. In 2015, I decided to take a break from, actually an unofficial break from the program for a year. That was when I was promoted to the first base coach, like Dr. Builder said, so kind of was doing the coaching thing full time. I since have taken a formal academic leave of absence, still working on my dissertation, but just not quite there. And then 2016 to 2018, I was assistant director of sports analytics. If any of you guys are interested, obviously I know Tucker over there. I know he'd be more than willing to speak with you guys. If you have interest other than just the sports analytics side, there's a lot of research going on over there with exercise physiology, with the research lab. I know the director there, very friendly, very nice. And so I would recommend, if you want me to set something up, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what is QQPM?
Qualitative, quantitative, and psychometric methods.
Okay.
And then 2016 to 2018, while I was assistant director, I was also a research assistant in the brain behavior and emotion lab. So that was analyzing fMRI data. Dr. Hideo Suzuki is the one who runs that. And that was interesting, but again, that there was a pretty steep learning curve in terms of trying to be able to analyze that type of data. But it was a good experience, and I enjoyed the work that I did do there.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? So you might remember when we were looking at courses that might be of interest to our students outside our department, EdPsych has lots of stat courses over there, and basically those are in that QQPM program.
Yeah, they have some Bayesian courses, there's multi-level modeling. I think that the biggest difference is a lot of those are just more applied, more applied than you don't get the theoretical approach to things that maybe you do over here in some courses. So yeah, there are a lot of courses offered, a lot of special topics courses as well. They have a lot of flexibility over there from what I've seen.
I mean, we've had other students who get a master's in stats, then they go over there for a PhD. We have, even some of our PhD students still take courses over in EdPsych.
So now getting to probably the main point of all of this is, what advice would I give to you guys? And again, this isn't like a real formal list. This is just kind of me spitballing things and taking from my experience, both in grad school and then as I kind of started the career and the job search and all that. The first thing is probably seek out what interests you. I think one of the things, if I had to go back and do it again, I know especially my first year in the program, from what I've seen, again, coming from the job that I'm currently in, just being really good technically isn't gonna get you. It might get your foot in the door in some situations, but you really have to have another area of expertise. Baseball was always something that interested me. I'd coached previously, and when I got the opportunity to join Coach Erstad's staff, I did that. It was a time commitment, but again, I think it was something that interested me. It allowed me to kind of continue to develop those skills while I was also kind of mastering my technical skills. And so if there's anything that interests you, I think there's probably a lot of resources on campus. I'll get to my next one here. Oh, sorry, that's not the next one. But I think the professors, the instructors, or other members of the department can kind of point you in the right direction. The learn to communicate, I kind of alluded to it in my first slide, but the types of people that I'm tasked with dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So something that's unique to my position, most analysts or most people in a quantitative position on the sports side typically report directly to their director, so a director of QA. I'm lucky in that I am much more coach-facing and player-facing than most. I think some of it is just because I do have the coaching background, so I've been given that freedom. But to learn to communicate, I think, is big, and not just in terms of presentations, but I have conversations with our general manager all the way down to like a 16-year-old kid in the Dominican who doesn't speak English and maybe only has education up to a second or third grade level. And so I think one of the things that maybe I do well is not only I can communicate, but I can also get an understanding of where a person is at depending on the situation and kind of tailor my message to kind of fit with what they're capable of taking in. I showed you some of the analytics that we do have. Far more information than any one player needs. We have, and I'll get to it here in a little bit, but we feed, especially at the major league level, like we give these guys a lot of information and kind of determining what information each player wants, how they want it delivered, and when that should be delivered is kind of an art more so than a science. And I think that's one thing that I've done, but I think that's applicable across any discipline, not just sports. And then going from the teaching side, one, if you have a chance to teach a course, I would recommend it. I think you learn a lot about one, your abilities, but then how others kind of receive that, and then transitioning from the in-class setup of Stat 218 to the online. You have to be pretty, in some cases, pretty flexible and pretty creative in terms of how you deliver your message. Use your resources, instructors and classmates. I know that was one thing I wish I did more of, and to this day probably could lean on the instructors. My advisor over in the Ed Psych department, my advisor who was in the stats department, Dr. Marks, who I'm not sure
He's
hasn't been around. Yeah, I knew that, but hasn't been around for a while. But they probably know more than you think. I know that was certainly the case where there was a lot of times I could have used my instructors more, but then also classmates. I know due to all the travel that I did do with the baseball team, that was a little bit difficult setting up study groups. But if you have the opportunity, I would recommend again using your resources. Attend conferences, meetings, symposiums, etc., whether that be on campus or you have the opportunity to travel. So I put the Great Lakes Sports Analytics Conference. Has anybody heard of that conference? You have? Okay, well, so apparently it's gotten bigger since I went. But I was telling Dr. Builder this, so I was invited to speak at this conference. It's in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I'd never heard of it. I think it was actually the first year that they did it. I wasn't all that excited to go, but I just decided I'll take a vacation. While I was there, the keynote speaker was actually the head of the data science program at Northwestern. That's where I met him. He saw my presentation, and then that kind of got the ball rolling and led into the teaching job that I have now, which again, I think I'm probably pretty lucky to have gotten. But every time I've gone to a conference, I don't want to say network. If you know me, I'm not the most outgoing person. I'm not just going to go up and start talking to someone, but it's always good to go out there, meet people, hand out your business card, make contacts, and then follow up with the contacts that you do make. I think it's probably my biggest piece of advice. I know when I was I go to the Sabre Analytics conference in Phoenix, it doesn't take you talking with him for 30 minutes. You walk up, you introduce yourself, hand them a business card, and then a couple days later, maybe a week later, you follow up, ask them a question related to their research, your research, just kind of get that conversation going. I think that goes a long way because people do remember that kind of stuff.
You mentioned what the Sabre Analytics Conference, what it actually is.
Oh, so the Sabre Analytics Conference is statistical analysis and baseball research or something like that. Basically what it is, it's kind of it's the one conference where baseball research is discussed and published. It's out in Phoenix. It's in March. It's when spring training is going on, and so there's a lot of organizations that send representatives out there. There's a lot of colleges that go there. They have a competition where teams from colleges can go and compete, and you can win. I don't think it's much, but you can win prizes and you get some notoriety, and it's just kind of a resume builder, I guess. But I think there's opportunities to go and meet people all over, even if it's just here on campus or I don't know. There's plenty of opportunities to do that. Pick out a conference at Internships and try to go there. Gain experience. So one of the things that I do know for a fact is when it comes to the position that I'm in, I'm very unique in the sense that almost 95% of all analysts working at any other organization first worked in an internship capacity. And so there's different levels. Sometimes it's, if you're local to a team, you can go there, 20 hours a week, whatever the case. Some of it is 6-month internships. Sometimes it's a year-long internship. Most of them are paid. It's not much, but you do get paid. And so I would recommend that's an easy way to get your foot in the door. I know from my perspective, if I hadn't gone into baseball, that's something that would have been quite a detriment to me was while I was in college, while I was in grad school, I didn't do any summer internships because I was coaching or catching up on coursework. And then volunteering, again, if there's something local you can do, that any experience is good experience. And so I would recommend, if you're able to do that, go ahead and do that. And I think this leads into my last point. I think this is the one thing that continues to surprise new people, whether it be at the job or in the courses that I teach. When I say learn how to work with data, and perhaps it's different now, but I know when I was going through the program, I don't think I was prepared for how much time, and this probably speaks more to my time in the sports analytics department, how much time you have to work on cleaning up data, summarizing data, missing data is a huge problem. Like, I think the biggest thing is people are shocked. I know when I first started with Tucker over there, that was probably 80% of my job was cleaning up data sources, making sure like the quality of the data that you're getting, checks and balances, and that's just, it's not fun, but it's something you're going to have to learn to do, and it's probably better sooner than later. So again, I think that probably goes hand in hand here. If you go out, you get some experience, you learn that really quickly, and I know that in the courses I teach, one of the things I do on their assignments, I make them go out and acquire their own data, and that's usually the biggest gripe at the end of the year is I spent so much time getting this data, cleaning it, and I say, well, that's part of the job. So that would be, you know, not that these are listed in order of importance, but I think that's a big one that, again, is universal, not just to the sports analytics field. And I'll kind of wrap up here pretty quickly, but so jobs in sports analytics, so one of the assignments that my students do is I have them go out, pick out a job that they're interested in and kind of give me what the qualifications the team or whatever is looking for. And, you know, you have jobs in baseball, basketball, football, soccer, hockey. All of them are very similar. Statistical programming language or experience using that. So R and Python are the big ones. I know for the Yankees in particular, we use a lot of R, but we've hired on new people who are used to Python, so we're kind of integrating that more. I know when I was going through this process with the Royals, they strictly use Python, but I think it's getting to be where you can probably use one or the other, where it doesn't hurt to know both. I'm kind of in the process of learning Python, and so if you can do that while you're in school, probably best. Experience with databases, so SQL, that was one thing that I didn't have a lot of experience with prior to joining the Yankees, but there's just the amount of data that we have collected and that we're expected to use, there's no way of getting around it. And so if there is a resource or a class that you can take on SQL, I would highly recommend that. That's probably, I would say, at this point, probably a deal breaker if you go through an interview and you don't have that experience. Just because I was telling Dr. Builder this, we recently had an opening for one of our associate positions, which is kind of like a year-long internship. There was 3 positions, and we had 2,600 applicants. And so, you know, if you're lacking in any area, that's an easy way to get dinged for that position. And the ability to communicate, again, like I mentioned, that's important. It always says it on every single job application without fail. Every student that writes up this, I ask them to tell me what they're good at, what things they're good at, and they inevitably say they are really good at communicating. Now going into specifically what types of jobs that we have at the Yankees, and I'll wrap up quickly, kind of going over here. Oh, I'm sorry. And then experience in a given sports area. Again, going back to the gather experience would be a recommendation. So what kind of jobs do we have in the Yankees organizations and other organizations? So kind of going from the top down. So we actually have an analyst that travels with the team. I think last time I looked, there was probably 5 or 6 other teams that had some type of position related to this that communicates some of our research, communicates some of the finding, and is a resource to the players and coaches if they need it. We have quantitative analysts in New York. Like I said, we have about 10. That continues to grow, and each one of them specializes in an area. Some of them do like pitching specific, some of them do defense specific, some do player evaluation, contract negotiations. Every one is kind of highly specialized. Player development analyst, again, that's my role. That's a little bit more general, a little bit more taking the information from the QA staff, dispersing it out to members of the organization and players. This is something we just started this year, which other teams I'm sure will start to copycat. Affiliate analysts, so we actually had 4 full-time quote-unquote analysts at each of our full season affiliates, so Tampa, Scranton, Trenton, and Charleston. They handled, again, some of the evaluation metrics, but then they handled a lot of the technology, so the wearable technology, the bat sensors, that kind of stuff. That was kind of their role. And then we also have analysts in performance science. That's a little bit different. Some have like exercise phys background, some just have, statistics with some sort of experience doing that type of research. And then I alluded to it before, but we actually have data engineer is a new job title or a new job we were seeking out, and I have seen that come up a number of times. I've probably seen 20 job postings in the last year, whether that be baseball, basketball, football organizations, wanting a data engineer, and I imagine that that's going to be something that if you're good at that, then you're going to have plenty of opportunities if you're interested. And then lastly, like I said, I have a list of resources. This is not exhaustive, and I would be happy to point you in the direction of if these are a little bit, or if you've already looked at some of these. I have a couple of books, the 3 that I mentioned earlier, and then a couple of the book, Analyzing Baseball Data with Others. If you're looking for a job in baseball specifically, there's a couple of books that you're going to be expected to know and understand and be able to kind of talk about, and that's those. And then conferences, MIT Sloan is another one, more general. One I went to in Phoenix, obviously the Great Lakes Sports Analytics Conference, and then a couple of websites, Fangraphs, Hardball Times, and then Driveline's website has a lot of publicly available information that you can kind of get started on. And then, like I said, if there's anything else you have questions on, you feel free to ask now or at any point in the future. I'd be happy to catch up with you and point you in the right direction. So that's all I've got.
Okay. Great. I'll start off with one question. I'll always ask a question. So, growing up, I was a Royals fan. Most Royals fans hated the Yankees.
Same. I was a Royals fan as well.
And often, how does one, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of people, who do end up going into the sports business. How do you overcome the fact that you grew up hating a particular organization and now you have to help that organization?
So, good question. My dad was actually a Yankees fan.
Okay.
He still is, and I knew that when I took the job, he would be excited. I actually got to take him to his first game in Yankee Stadium this last year. I think in some respects, it's probably better that I was not a Yankees fan growing up because it doesn't really cloud your judgment. You don't get attached to players, as much. We actually, right when I got brought on, they released a former Nebraska player, then signed Cody Ashe right after that, and then quickly released him. It's a little bit, it's interesting when you know players or you've been around them before, but I think, again, the Royals weren't willing to pay me to go work for them, so my allegiance has changed pretty quickly.
So, do you know more about the Royals organization in terms of their analytics?
So, I know that. So I had actually applied for a job with them right before I got the Yankees job. I was in the middle of kind of it. So the interview process is essentially you submit a resume. They'll send you a questionnaire. This is pretty standard across all organizations. A questionnaire, it's usually about 6 pages. They give you 2 weeks. They give you some data to work with, see how you write it up, see the kind of visualizations you come up with. At the time, I think the Royals only had 2 or 3 full-time analysts, and on the minor league side, I don't know. One of the unique things about the Yankees is our assistant general manager was the former director of QA, and so he leans on the QA a lot more than most other organizations probably would, because he knows everything about it. He knows he's been there for 15 years. He basically started all of it, and so he kind of understands how everything works. And I think that's pretty unique setup.
Well, we've seen how the Royals have gone downhill, so obviously they made a mistake by not hiring you.
I don't know. I don't think I'm the missing piece.
Okay, are there other questions?
I have probably 2 questions. First one is, so I grew up playing sports and I love sports, and then I just kind of stumbled upon math and stats. Like I liked it, but I didn't know I would actually end up doing it.
Sure.
So now, at first I was really interested in like doing some research in baseball and football, but every time I see a study on results and I say, oh, that was obvious. What's the point of doing this? So how do you see stuff like that and still be interested in doing like the type of job you have? Obviously, you have a lot of